Hey, it's Jimmy with Banking Bridge. Great to have Sean Caldwell with Forever American Mortgage on our next episode of Behind the Leads. Sean is based out of Arizona, Scottsdale. Is that right?
We're in Phoenix.
Phoenix.
Yeah.
Grew up in Arizona. Is that right?
For the most part. Yeah.
Okay. Sean started at Quicken a number of years ago, and now he's got his own thing going on. So I thought he'd be great to bring in, kind of talk about his story, what he has planned, his growth. He's doing some pretty good execution on lead buying. Sean, thanks for jumping in.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, Jimmy. Excited to be here.
Cool. Well, we like to start at the beginning. Where did you grow up, and what kind of kid were you?
I don't think anyone, if I reflect back to the beginning, thinks that they're going to end up in mortgages, yet alone knows what a mortgage is. Mm-hmm. So I'm sure all of us have somewhat of a similar story, how we found the industry. Native to Arizona growing up, originally from California, went to ASU. And I think anyone in that early adulthood is not really sure what's next. And you try to emulate people that are potentially successful around you. My dad was in hospitality, and I went to school for international hospitality management. Apologize, my coworker popping up in the background there.
Yeah, you're all good.
So I went to ASU, and the goal was, let's get into hotels. My dad did well for himself, and I thought something like that sounded interesting to me. I wanted to travel. Right out of school, I ended up getting into fine dining. I was a bar manager at a steakhouse, and I had a colleague of mine that was a processor at Quicken. And, you're 21, 22 years old, and this guy's wearing a suit, and he's got a 9 to 5. And I'm like, okay, that seems legit. I don't really know what he does, but it must be good. And kind of a funny story. I'm not really a gambler, but one of the nights he was like, hey, do you want to go play blackjack with me at the casino? And I'm like, all right, fine. I haven't really got anything going on. And this guy, met him. It was a loan officer at Quicken. And full preface, turns out this guy had a little bit of a gambling problem, but I watched this guy lose a lot of money in a short period of time. And maybe 15 minutes went by, and he stands up casually and he goes, all right, not my night. Hey, nice meeting you. I'm going to get out of here. And I immediately turned to my friend at the time, the processor. I'm like, what does that guy do? Because he was around our age. And he's like, oh man, he's a loan officer. He's a banker. And I'm like, what does that mean? And he gave me the whole gist. And it was kind of like, as terrible as it sounds, that scene out of Wolf of Wall Street where it says, you show me a check for $60,000 a month, I quit my job and I come work for you. Uh-huh. And funny enough, that's kind of what introduced me to the industry. I saw this guy that just lost a sum of money that I would be uncomfortable with, unfazed, and
shrug it off.
Ironically, 30 days later, I was interviewing at Quicken. So that's the indirect way of how I got in. I followed the money, like a lot of us probably at one point did.
It's so funny because everybody has kind of a story like that. They're like, I met a guy, he was kind of not an idiot, but sort of, and he making all this money. And I was like, golly, if he can do it, surely I can do this job.
Exactly.
And then, so the fine dining is interesting because a lot of mortgage is the details. The devil's in the details in everything in mortgage. And I'm assuming that helped you. You got to know the wine. You got to know the different cocktails. You got to know what's on the menu. Did that play any part into like your ability to understand all the moving parts when you first got into mortgage, or not?
Maybe
really?
Less on the details and more on just understanding the fundamentals of communication.
Yeah.
There's a great book about a Michelin star restaurant in New York called Unreasonable Hospitality. Highly recommend. And it's just kind of going above and beyond. And yes, the details matter. Super, super important. But I think really why mortgage is such a great place for people to start, or maybe why the transition was so easy for me, was because I had those fundamentals of communication down. And I think that's really the gateway to being successful in this industry. Learning how to effectively communicate. What we talk about is dense and boring. So you really have to be able to simplify and understand client needs to be able to identify, hey, what's the best outcome based on what they're telling me. And I think if you fall short on kind of that client experience and communication, your business suffers.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you remember your first day at Quicken? Do you remember your first like weeks or train?
Oh,
What were they putting
absolutely.
you through? What was
Yeah.
the first
Yeah.
like couple of days like?
It probably has the best training in the industry because of the
Uh,
sheer volume and resources that they have. And I know that there's this stigma that they're the evil empire. Having been there, I get it. And I could understand why a broker would see that because of their buying power and how much presence they have. But they're really not the boogeyman. They have incredible culture and they give you all the tools to succeed. And you have so many resources at your fingertips. Um, you specialize when you first get into Quicken. So there's so much you don't know, but at the same time, you know so much more because of the sheer bats you get compared to what a broker would get. So I was a refinance specialist. That's what we prioritized. And I remember it was somewhat of a refi boom. This was probably 2013, 2014. And I remember the first week on the floor, the first day on the floor, this was pre-TRID. So it was good faith estimate, no loan estimate. You didn't have to have the intent to proceed. And at the time, the way you'd get a client's commitment is getting their payment information for the appraisal once you presented a loan option. And you're just trying to figure out what's going on. But I remember the first day on the floor, I was able to find and help 3 clients, which I was riding high. And I think, maybe one of the 3 ended up working out because I really was still trying to kind of figure everything out. And you have like a support system and a director that's kind of looking over your shoulder, making sure you know what to do and what to say. But yeah, you kind of get thrown into the fire. And I know that's a stigma that's negative because, something I personally sell against now is, hey, these guys are brand new. They don't really know the full picture. But prior to getting to the floor where I was licensed and actually taking calls, I spent about 4 to 5 months passing safe, doing all the different trainings. You're kind of a new banker environment. So it's loan origination with training wheels.
Do they put you in like processing for 3 weeks and closing for a couple weeks, or did not really?
No, and that's where kind of how we created our business too, where it's like, hey, I want my people that are in sales selling. I want them on the front line doing what they do best. If I can outsource the administrative work to someone that's going to be processing, by all means, I'm going to pay someone that specializes just in getting the loan to the closing table. So everything's compartmentalized. And the reason you can do the crazy volume that you can is because they have that conveyor belt where everything's the system. Everyone has a role, right? My job is the enrollment. I need to measure twice, cut once, make sure this file is clean. Nobody wins if we don't get to the finish line. But as soon as it's into underwriting, I'm enrolling more clients. And of course, I'm monitoring and kind of playing quarterback throughout the underwriting process. But I have other points of contact that are kind of playing the lead role of getting to the finish line. So you're really not doing a whole bunch. And so fast forward, I climbed up the leadership ladder really quick. I only spent a certain amount of time in production. And when you're in leadership, you're still actively producing, but you're just in charge of loan officers. So I went from being a director to kind of running a region. And then when I left Quicken, which was 2019, it was one of those reality checks of, oh, wow, there's so much more that I have no clue of. You think you know so much, and you do in that little kind of like bubble that you live in. But when I got into the broker space, the wholesale space, all these overlays that I thought just meant, hey, there's no loan here. All this stuff you could do on the back end to get to the finish line. It was like learning a whole new world that I was just completely oblivious to.
So they kept you in the dark a little bit at Quicken because the conveyor belt needed to just fit this type of loan. And so when you were producing, when you were just a loan officer taking calls, how many times did you say your script a day? Was it 50? Was it 25? Or
structure matters. I mean, no. So like, it depends, right? It's market contingent, but like similar to the environment I've created at FAM, we want people to be on. And it's no different than any other sport as the analogy I like to compare it to. If you're on the bench and you're cold, man, it's tough when you got to dive in and think on your feet. So on an average day in an environment like that, just like my company, we'll get 8 to inbound opportunities. And then of course, we're very keen on the KPIs of what that benchmark needs to be, right? Of how many inbound calls do we get to credit? How many credits does it take to get an application? How many applications before we submit to underwriting? Like everything is in the details. So we're constantly creating weekly plans, monthly plans. We're figuring out areas that are bottlenecks. Hey, where are we struggling? Are we running into this on the intro? Are we getting these objections? So you're fine tuning the machine nonstop, and it's sun up to sundown. I think when I was at Quicken, I would work 65-hour weeks, and it's just what I knew. That's all I knew, right? And you're a young kid and the money's good, but you're definitely getting fed out of a fire hydrant.
And so a lot of the things that you track in the way that you structured your at least sales techniques and tracking, you learned at Quicken.
I would say that's the foundation. I think they are the gold standard when it comes to consumer direct. Everyone tries to emulate. Loan Depot is really just learning from the Quicken that paved the way, the freedoms of the mortgage, these other big retail shops. They're all kind of feeding off the ecosystem that Quicken created, in my opinion.
So what was the trick when you were at Quicken and you did I think 4.5 years? How long into that 4.5 year period did you realize, I think I'm ready to do my not own thing or whatever the next chapter was, where you felt like I've graduated from this and I'm ready for the next, venture and mortgage?
It really wasn't on my radar. I was doing extremely well. And I think that like the cream rises to the top. Like there is an ecosystem for the guys that just show up and get stuff done. And you're very well compensated if you are one of the elite. Now that has a revolving door, and there's a lot of people that don't make it. The ones that do kind of play the game and are good at what they do, you're targeted frequently. So there was a gentleman that was the youngest vice president at Quicken that had left and started a small brokerage known as JFQ Lending. And a handful of us top loan officers and leaders were targeted because we were all kind of in the same tutelage. We all were competing against each other. And, you started understanding the basis points. Like a place like Quicken, a lot of these consumer direct shops, you're making a small fraction, but you're just doing a ton of volume. Mm-hmm. And then you start understanding, well, I can make how much per loan? And 2019, I think simultaneous, you're years into your career, you're kind of getting tired of the schedule. They were getting ready to IPO, so there's more bureaucracy, and it just kind of felt a little bit stiffer than the environment you first started at. And it wasn't on my radar till it was. And then I was pretty decisive about taking a leap. I'd saved up a lot of money, and I saw some friends that had left right before I did having a lot of success. And this shop had 12, 13 people at it. That was it. When we left 2019, we went from 15 people to 1,000 people in 2.5 years. We caught lightning in a bottle, and we were the fastest growing lender in the country. We ended up doing 10 billion in origination in that 3-year period. And it was just perfect timing, right? COVID happened, rates shot down, and we took all the stuff we knew at Quicken, how to develop loan officers, how to run the day, the week, and just implemented it. And I ended up staying kind of in upper management with that company, which ultimately gave me kind of the inside of how this business was built from the ground up, to eventually want to go leave the nest and go build my own. Because what we initially saw was more of a mid-market feel. We wanted that small, shop where everybody was friendly with each other. Everyone showed up and got their job done. Everyone handled their role. But over time in that short period, when we just grew so quick, it just became way more enterprise, right?
How do you find that many people? Because this is all happening in Arizona and the Phoenix,
we had a California branch, but 90% of our volume. And if you look at the data, look how many originators came into the industry in the 2020s. It's full circle back to like what we described. It's like, you, of course, same with my company now, run your Indeeds, et cetera. You're always looking for good talent, but birds of a feather flock together. So oftentimes when you find a superstar and they're really, really successful, you want the individuals that associate with that individual. So it's more of a compound effect. and we would heavily incentivize referrals. So you have to have standards, but it's quick to hire, quicker to fire when you're scaling like that.
And you were in sales management. You managed the sales team.
Correct.
Wow. What did you learn there? What did you learn at that stop? Did you say?
Marketing. And, you know, I think so many people are so ignorant to like what it takes to make the phone ring and how much it really costs. It's not cheap, you know, and I think that a lot of people that try to get into the lead space aren't prepared for that model. They don't understand the investment that it takes time making that investment before you kind of stabilize returns. Being there, I saw from the ground up how to build audiences, you know, how to create models based on what we would predict conversions to be at, the background of really what makes the phone ring.
Yeah. What were you doing? Like, what was a marketing initiative that you found worked, that you've taken with you, or an idea that you felt like this is the way to do it?
So the challenge with marketing consumer direct is the balance between audience size and the longevity of how long you can run a campaign. So I'll give you an example. You know, if you're running direct mail, and right now rates are potentially higher over the last few years and where consumers' current rates at, that's a hard audience to market to. However, there's loans that would benefit the consumer if they're crippled in credit card debt. If I work with credit bureau to get pre-screen data, I can identify maybe a consumer that has equity, but has a lot of consumer debt. And it might make sense to consolidate that debt, whether it's a first lien mortgage or potentially a second. If I get too granular and I say, I only want people with $25,000 of credit card debt, maybe I only have 6,000 people in my audience that fit the filters that I'm put on. Well, I know on a decent campaign, I should convert at anywhere from 0.5% to 1% response rate. So think about it. 1% response on 6,000 pieces of mail is 60 calls. If my conversion is 10% call to application, man, I'm only getting 6 loans. So if I get too granular on my audience, I go mail that 6,000 people in 1 week, I generate 60 calls. I don't get to determine when those calls come through, but I know over time that I'll have a spike on the initial 2 days of the drop, and then it will taper. So it's always going to be a heavier Monday, Tuesday, and then a lighter Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Well, what do I do next Friday? My audience is gone. I can't mail the same audience. The conversion drops significantly. So this, you said before, devil's in the details, but almost inversely true, where you got to open up the audience wide to make sure if I'm going to go start a campaign, I have enough to really get enough sample size, where when I start a new campaign, I'm trying to know that I have enough data to mail for 12 weeks. Mail compounds and has a long leg to it. So maybe you get 80% of your callers the first week, but some people only check their mail every few weeks. So with mail, you have to run it every single week to try to kind of normalize the response rate.
So you found mailers at that time, no Facebook stuff, or a little bit, but was it like 80% mailers during that period of time where you were at JFQ?
Unique because in refi markets, anybody can fall into a loan, and it doesn't really matter if you're a big consumer direct shop or a single broker. It's because loans just make sense and traffic's high and consumer sentiment is around, I want to get into a better mortgage because I know rates are better. So in times like that, it's really buy as much as you possibly can afford to try to get as much volume as you have the capacity to handle. You know, I'm always looking at it like, what is our underwriting and processing capacity? And if I can handle more, I need more spend.
So you back into that. The limit is what you can underwrite and process.
Right. And you're looking for any time, you know, what I always try to focus on with marketing is intent. You know, like my job is to help the client determine if there's an option that could benefit them. But what I want as a business owner, as a loan officer, is the intent of a client to at least explore the opportunity of something making sense or not. You know, like it's not always going to go your way, and that's fine. It's just, does someone have the intent to talk? So in times like that, all these long form lead buys, pay-per-click traffic, You know, that kind of segues into the website that we built, and why, in my mind, as much as we love mail doesn't work for all consumers, which a large
Hmm.
part of the mail, we're running QR codes for a
Hmm.
personalized URL on a landing page.
Yeah, and that's helped. So, what about like some downtimes when you were there and you decided to open up? You was there a period of time, because in the mortgage business, everybody's career has peaks and valleys at some point. What was a time where things got tough, and you sometimes, most people in the mortgage industry, they don't stick through it. They find something else. Maybe they didn't save enough money to get them through the lean times. Was there a period of time where where you were like, man, this is harder than I thought, or it might be today. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean,
What?
gosh, right? Entrepreneurship, I think we could probably both like just identify how crazy of a roller coaster that
Right.
is. We had pretty aggressive non-competes, especially in upper management. And when I left, this was 2022, I had a non-compete that was 12 months long.
Mhm.
And initially that was great because I needed a sabbatical. And I'd just been working for a decade,
Yeah.
70, 60 hours a week. But when we started the company, we bootstrapped everything. And to run consumer direct, you need a war chest.
Yeah.
And building that war chest took a ton of time. So you can't just dive in. Unfortunately, when you're trying to play the game of mail or building a company from the ground up, you just forget how much foundation has to be set to have the framework of success. Your tech stack, your onboarding, your compliance and licensing. There's so many administrative tasks that just got done. And prior to starting my own company, I was in charge of conversion and sales. I was in charge
Mhm.
of managing loan officers and onboarding them. I wasn't in charge of all the other hats. So I think,
Yeah.
to answer your question, yeah, it's a roller coaster. Some days you're on top of the world and you're like, I got it all figured out. And later that afternoon, you're like, man, this was the worst decision ever. What am I doing?
It's totally true. I think everybody can relate to that. So let's talk about the name, because you understand branding and you understand marketing and you worked at Quicken and name and colors. Why did you choose the name that you chose? What's
I
the
can't
story
I
behind that?
can't take credit. So my co-founder is also from Quicken. He's
Okay.
about 10 years older, and we were playing around with ideas. And initially we wanted something that just felt like it had been around. We wanted to have some resonance with the name of like, oh, okay, like they've been here.
Hmm.
And his wife actually came up with it. You're kind of in the think tank, you're sitting around grabbing coffee and you're throwing out all these crazy different names. And um yeah, Forever American, we're like, wow, that resonates. That seems like kind of like a sense of patriotism and pride, and it kind of feels like it's resolute, that's been here for a while. And then we notice like, oh, the acronym's also FAM.
Yeah.
And there's so many entendres you can play off that. When one of those things where I wish there was a funnier story behind it. We just had her pitch it like, what about this? And we said it, and we're like, wait, oh yeah. And that's
Yeah.
ultimately how we landed on it.
So you talked your co-founder. Why is he different than you? Why did you choose him, or why do you think he chose you?
Yin and
Why, what do
yang.
you need in a What do you need in a partner?
Yeah, I think someone to balance you. I ran sales, and so did he. He's got 10 years on me, so he has a stoicism that he brings to the table. I would definitely say I'm the nerd of the company, the guy that's building the tech stack and trying to
Mhm.
optimize. He's the guy that is kind of the head of sales, helping manage the number of personalities that you have inside of a sales team. He just brings a level of wisdom. He's incredible at training too. I think that like when I started, he had been in the industry for a number of years. He was always a guy I looked up to as just a mentor figure. So I think we have a perfect balance.
Yeah.
He's got the nerves of being able to kind of just provide confidence and set direction of where we're going, while I try to focus on the vision and the nuts and bolts of what makes the company run smoothly and always looking to kind of increase its efficiency.
And so you guys met at Quicken. Was he part of JFQ as
He
well?
was. Yeah.
And so did y'all have, I mean, were you thinking when you were there that this guy's a good partner, or did y'all even have any thoughts of opening up your own thing? I guess, a lot of people are maybe they're at a group where they're ready to make their own move. Do you think you could have done it by yourself, or do you think it's better to have a teammate with you?
Man, I've known both. I've known people that have even more founders than us, which I think is crazy. There's just too many cooks in the kitchen. There's not enough meat on the bone.
Yeah.
And I've seen people that have done it single-handedly, and I'm like, man, to think that I would have to do all this myself scares the living crap out of me. So I think, yeah, to answer your first part of the question, you're definitely talking about it because you're seeing the success of this company real time, and you're like, man, we could do this.
Yeah.
So it's kind of more, I would say, locker room talk for the longest time, like, oh man, what if we did it, because you left this big enterprise and then you were really at ground zero watching it be built. I think two is the sweet spot. And I think no different than a partner in life, a spouse, probably the most important decision you make because you really all are married in business. You're not always going to see eye to eye. So I think that, our personalities complement each other perfectly. But for anyone aspiring, it's kind of one of those things, probably similar to a partner. It takes work, but when you know,
Yeah. What about like young loan officers? I think you and I agree. It's a great industry to be in. If you're 22 years old or 21 years old, from my personal experience, I was a mortgage loan officer for 15 years. My first job out of college, I worked at a home builder called Beazer Homes, and this was in 2004. And that was the time the market was super hot. And I was an assistant, worked in the model home, and we did like 25, 30 sales a month. We saw all these people. And like you said, the reps, you just had the ability to have all these reps. And I learned in a year what it probably would have taken a realtor to learn in 3 or 4 years because of the number of reps. I feel like that's what you mentioned at Quicken was the learning curve it's steep, but you learn so much because you get so many at-bats. Do you still think Quicken's a good training ground for young LOs or young people?
Yeah, I think it's the best. Or just anywhere consumer direct.
Yeah.
I just think that I've had friends that saw my career, saw my success, that were workers with me in hospitality, and then they dove right into the broker space. And I think you can do it, but I think you're really coming out at a significant disadvantage. There's so many great brokers that are great because they can get stuff done. And the only way you can get stuff done is unfortunately trial by fire.
Yeah.
And I think that having the massive amount of reps and resources found at a consumer direct shop sets the foundation for you to determine what you want to do long term in the industry.
Yeah.
I mean, there's an eventual fork in the road where you kind of figure out like, hey, pick your hard. Grabbing 10 calls a day is not easy, and calling real estate agents isn't easy. So both are pretty hard to do, but I think one gives you the foundation to have confidence to go to the other if you kind of want to evolve and build a book of business as you get more experience in the industry.
Do you like it if you're hiring a loan officer or you have a resume, they're interested in working with you guys? Do you like it if you see Quicken on their resume?
Oh,
or
yeah.
would you rather them you do?
Yeah, because you get it. Your work ethics.
What you're getting.
Hopefully, right? Like it would definitely make me inquire a whole bunch more. What happened, right? Because oftentimes there's a lot of fallout. I don't want the washout. But I know that, hey, you went through some industry top in class training, and I know they have all the resources to give people a significant head start in the industry. But to your point, I oftentimes don't prefer tenured loan officers. It's kind of like teach a dog old tricks.
Yeah.
Just a lot of bad habits from what I see. And unfortunately, a lot of the times, some has-beens where like, hey, let's say you had a lot of success in 2020, 2022, the market went up, and you said, step back, and now you want to get back in because you hear rates are coming. I always get a little concerned.
Hmm.
I'm like, well, if you couldn't make it through the tough times and you're kind of hanging your hat on what you think you're worth from 2020, it might not be a good fit.
Yeah, I would agree with that. We see a lot of that. We also see a lot of this. The reason that I liked talking to you and I enjoy the way that you run your business is because we talk to a lot of mortgage lenders, and we call them take over the world guys. We'll talk to them, and it's just him, and he wants to do all this lead buying. He's going to have license in 50 states and
Yeah.
blah blah, blah, and he hasn't done anything. How
Yeah.
did you approach when you opened the doors for Forever American? What was like the near term goal? What was like a 1 year goal of, hey, we're
That's
going to
so
be in
funny.
this market, or
Yeah.
what is it? How do you become successful with small bites of the elephant? I guess that's
You
what I
know
feel like you
what's
guys do a good job of.
Yeah, that's so funny because we came from two take over the world shops, right? Like the month resets, you start at 0 and it's go, 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 go.
Yeah.
And then we went to this JFQ, and I got to give credit, even though had some, you know, differences of opinion, but the owner of the company, JFQ, had a take over the world mentality. I think that was like a mantra that we spoke, and he kind of willed it into existence. Like he
Hmm.
bootstrapped that thing up to 10 billion in volume and sold it to a Berkshire Hathaway company.
Wow.
Our mentality as we got out is, okay, I'm now a decade plus into my career. I want longevity. Man, there's that funny, if you're not first, you're last. Not true at
Uh-huh.
all. Number 2, 3, 4, and 5 can do really, really well for themselves. And our mentality was, hey, we want to kind of find that sweet spot. There's a size of a company that's, you know, 20, 30 loan officers that everyone's doing really, really well. You don't have to get super enterprise and bring in HR and all these other variables. And that was kind of our North Star. It's like, hey, how can we create a feel of longevity where everyone just kind of handles their business? We're
Hmm.
here to guide and support you, but we never lose sight of that kind of small mid-market feel. So we
Hmm.
came in with the intention of, we're fine flying under the radar. Like, who cares? Like, I think with those take over the world companies, they like glorify this mortgage industry. And I'm like, guys, we're doing home loans. Like, let's not act like it's anything special. Like, clients don't like talking about it. They
Right.
dread this conversation. So
Right.
let's get in where we fit in, and we'll be fine.
Yeah. So recently, I think in the last 6 or 8 months, you guys made the investment into a new website.
Yeah.
Why'd you do what? Like, walk me through that. What did you feel like you're missing on that side of things?
I think so many of these small shops that you see are just so out of date. They're
Mhm.
so predictable. They look like they're these websites from the 2000s, and I think the consumer is rapidly changing. So I said, hey, why are we reinventing the wheel? Let's go look at the top shops. This is what our competition is doing. They're spilling billions a year to market a certain aesthetic. Don't beat them, join them. We
Mhm.
found an incredible developer, and he actually challenged us and said, would you be open to changing your entire brand? Initially, we are like, we love our logo. It's great. We've already paid for the sign on our building. It's timeless. It was red, black, and gray were our brand colors, but it was so predictable. So many companies had done something similar, patriotic, clip art house with the flag, and it just felt boring.
Mhm.
And I think that for me, as like a forward thinking futurist that's really like keen on technology and emerging artificial intelligence, I'm like, man, how do we future proof ourselves? Because this industry is absolutely going to change rapidly over the next few years.
Mhm.
And we went into it with an investment of like, hey, we want consumers to come into our ecosystem and say, these guys are legit.
Mhm.
And I think the first impression you get as a modern consumer is, let me go do my due diligence. That's how I am. So, of course, you have your older generations that might just pick up the piece of mail and call. But a lot of younger folks, and I just put myself in the shoes of the consumer, are going to do their due diligence and research. I'm going to scan the QR code and poke around and see what these guys are about before I engage.
Mhm.
We're constantly being solicited for our attention everywhere we look, whether it's on social media, radio, if you still listen to that, anywhere, right? It's always an advertisement. And I think the modern consumer is become keen on that. So I said, okay, well, I'm going to kind of take the different approach. I'm going to give radical transparency. I'm going to have a very clean, simplistic website. I'm going to model after the Rockets, the better. They've probably spent millions trying to do case studies as to what the consumer wants. So like, cool, let's just ride the coattails of an aesthetic that I enjoy, that I think looks clean, and set the foundation for how the industry will evolve over the next few years. I just think that we're going to see massive changes.
Did you have any concerns about having rates available without talking to somebody? Because Quicken shows rates. I mean, it's not they lead with rate, but or did you have any hesitation to that?
Yeah, and I think that like you have to understand the different kind of audience of what you're looking for. So if you do any kind of digital advertising, you don't drive them to a website, you drive them to a landing page. You put the guardrails on, right? Because we're trying to convert that traffic into someone providing contact information to be solicited, and then we can go into the details. But I also thought on the opposite end, radical transparency is the best thing, because everyone else is hiding it and being deceptive. Then by all means, if I can go build presence and have some organic traffic, I want to pull the curtain back. Like, what you see is what you get. And I think that there's a misconception from the consumer side that somehow a higher or lower rate makes me more or less money. And I'm like, hey, if I can give you the tools, I'm going to put more credit to the consumer that they're savvy enough to kind of figure out more or less what they like. And as soon as we went live with the banking bridge integration and the website, we probably had 4 consumers that just stumbled on our website through SEO and marketing that did engage. They go through the full funnel, and the first correspondence with them was raving about the transparency and how they just felt like in control of what was moving without, a bunch of deceptive practices.
Yeah. It's funny how you just instantly build trust without even having to talk to them. And they believe in you, they believe you, and it makes the whole process faster, actually. You think it would be different. You think you'd just be discussing rate the whole time, but no, they trust you, and they, typically seem to move forward. So we haven't talked about CRM, and I know you guys use a lot. First of all, what CRM are you using?
We've fully built out a CRM from the foundation to high level. It's become really popular in the last year or so. It's like kind of a sandbox system where you can create snapshots. And, we were an adopter, or I was an adopter of high level 5 years ago. So it's been the foundation, but ironically, nothing really is a turnkey solution in mortgage. And it always blew my mind. So we use high level, but we fully customized it with a bunch of other integrations, just because of the sheer volume of mail and leads that we have, just to keep things organized.
So you have all your LOs in high level. They're working in high level. They're dialing out of high level. Is that right? They're taking calls through? Or
pretty much. So like you need a dialing system when you're running mail because of licensing and lead routing. But like the skinny of it is we have a database, Supabase. There's a ton of different solutions that stores all of my raw data. So every week I'll probably mail 25,000 pieces of mail, and each contact has a reference ID. But when we send the mail to a home, we don't know who's going to be calling from that home. So that consumer calls a toll number that goes to a dialer that we have, and that can do intelligent routing based on where the state is calling from, and then it routes to the loan officer. When the loan officer receives the call, I've built the integration inside a high level to do like a lead lookup where they can type in that reference ID, and then it will say Jimmy King. And I'm like, hey, is this Jimmy? And then I'll see the caller ID number, and it will actually enrich the contact. So now that reference ID that was stored in the database integrates into the CRM, associates the phone number that called in. And then for all one-to-one communication, high level is great because it's omni-channel. Like inside of the ecosystem, the email, the text, the call, all is in one conversation view. And that's their business line, which is also an app on my LO's phone, their cell phone. So even if they're outside of the office, away from the CRM, all business comes through their cell, but on the CRM.
Huh. That's interesting. So that's your baby. That's what you live and die by, your CRM.
Yeah.
was it the first thing that you built? Did you build that before you started your own thing, or did you? How did that go? Like, because most of the time, you need this, and you don't have to wait for the company to start to get your CRM up and running.
I wish we spent tens of thousands on different solutions trying to find the right one. So I guess backing up a little bit, when I left in 22 and I had the non-compete, I had all this free time and I wanted to go be active. I decided I was going to commit that year to trying to complete an Ironman triathlon. So I was like, oh man, if I have all this time off, I'm going to go balls to the wall. And about 6 months in, I was like, man, I'm bored. I want to get to work. So a friend was the vice president at a real estate CRM called Chime. And typically they didn't have any account executives came over to do software sales that weren't going kind of through the progression. And I was like, hey, I'm just a little too far in my career to come start from the bottom, but I have a lot of experience with agents and I can understand tech. So anyways, I did a brief stint as an account executive doing software sales while I was on my non-compete. And it gave me a really good foundational understanding of CRMs and kind of the inner workings. On the real estate side, there's a ton of turnkey solutions. There's probably 5 or 6 players. The mortgage side has nothing. And it's so interesting because we have so many fields of data that we need to track. You need so many integrations between your loan origination and your CRM. Like nothing is out of the box.
Yeah.
So when we were first starting, we were trying a little bit of everything and nothing seemed to work. And because we came from this consumer direct world where you have this really good reporting, we are trying to create these Frankenstein systems. So I had played a little bit with high level, but I never really saw its full potential. And high level always is integrating new updates and releases. And eventually enough time passed where their APIs gave me the ability to integrate our loan origination system and create the tech stack we have now. But we took the scenic route and it cost us a ton of money. Same with marketing, right? Like you're getting into this bootstrap admin position and you have been there and you kind of see a tech stack that you've worked in, but you don't know all the expensive, learning lessons to kind of fine tune the one that works for you.
Yeah. Stroking the check is a lot different than looking at the guy stroking the check. And then the school of hard knocks, my co-founder and I laugh about, the first year you're just blowing money on, it's just stuff like same thing you went through, this idea, that idea, this person, this consultant, this thing. And you really have to, you're naive and you believe stuff. And it does take a little bit of time to kind of get everything fit into the right place for that. So you guys focus just to talk about FAM. Most of your business, new business is mailers. 80% of that of your budget is mailing. You still believe heavily in that.
Yeah. I think it's just the most predictable to high intent, like we've done pay-per-click, we've done social media marketing, we've done long form lead. Whenever you're running those, it works. It's capable of working, but nothing gives you kind of the unfiltered intent of a live consumer talking to you real time.
Yeah.
I think that you create an ecosystem that allows stuff to be reserved back up. And once they enter your ecosystem, you're trying to continue to solicit. I built a call center overseas that are full-time to us with management and full-time dialers. And those are kind of the folks that help us serve stuff back up. You can't choose when someone calls in. So we might have all 15 loan officers on the call on a heavy call flow day, like a Monday, but then we have 20 calls come in. So I don't want to lose those calls. So I have them flow to our overseas team, grab it, solicit, transfer it back to a loan officer. But same with the CRM or tools like the banking bridge, where like once they're in our ecosystem, we want to nurture and kind of keep those alive. But for new incoming business, for at least the consumer direct guys that work with us, mail is what we live by. And then we have a couple guys that are more hybrid that take the occasional mail when business is slow, But with the tech that I've built and all the assets we have are out there really soliciting self-gen with sphere of influence.
Boots on the ground stuff.
Yeah.
So as we wrap up here, I always like to ask, what makes a good loan officer?
I think a good loan officer is a problem solver. I think you have to be able to effectively listen. I tell people on the floor, nobody wants to listen until they know they've been heard, right?
Mhm.
So you have to really, really be a high level communicator, but also a problem solver. Like I think of a guy that we have here at our shop that is leading in volume and he just gets stuff done. He is diligent in his due diligence. He goes the extra mile and he finds out answers to problems. Like one of the benefits of a broker is just having all the products at our disposal.
Mhm.
But you have to learn the guidelines of what you can and can't do within those products. We have a large number of our guys that are bilingual. So that can come with its own set of issues as you're trying to navigate visas, et cetera. And he is exceptional because he doesn't take stuff at face value. And I love when we find wins where, maybe there's a disagreement with underwriting and someone's home is on the line and we're able to get it to the finish line because they oversaw something or miscalculated something and we're keen on the details and we're solution focused.
Yeah. So problem solving, that's a good one, I would say.
Yeah.
Sean, anything you want to close with?
No,
You're young in the business. I love talking to people that are my age or young. You're probably a little bit younger than me. Is the future bright in the mortgage industry?
It's looking like, yeah. I think if we can weather the storm like we have the last couple of years, what goes up must come down.
Yep.
And we don't want them to come down too quick, a slow,
Let's keep them there for a little while.
slow cruise.
That's right.
No, I think what you've built is incredible. I absolutely love the interface of Banking Bridge. Like I remember, I think I'm always trying to have like a good way of like figuring out like what's out there. I'm always searching like what could make our business better. And I remember I stumbled on a developed website from the developers that built ours. Shout out Vlad at WebCherry.
Mm-hmm.
And, at the very bottom in the footer, I saw their little logo. And, from there, I started going down the weeds. And then I was like, oh, these funnels are second to none. Like these are just as good, if not better, than the big players.
Mm-hmm.
And when I found out that you guys were a SaaS solution that could just directly integrate, I was like, man, like this is a no-brainer.
Yeah.
And seeing just the interface that you guys have built and the hands-on support that you guys have provided. It's awesome working with a company that, keeps open rapport and dialogue with its clients. So shout out to you guys. You've built an incredible product and our clients love it.
Thanks, Sean. And it's great to see. I like the idea that you're taking an old school approach, which to me, mailers, you say mailers to people and they're like, oh, they roll your eyes, but you're putting a new twist on it.
Yeah.
And you're just understanding data, you're understanding technology. So it's fun to see you guys growing and winning out there. So thank you for the time and sharing some knowledge with the group over here.